Tonight, our main speaker is Dan. Help me welcome Dan.
Good evening. I am blessed to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name's Dan. Dan. Old man, hey you, any of that crap. Devin mentioned his sobriety date, and mine is the 7th of January, 1980. I would love to be able to take credit for that. It's not on me. They made me hook up with a power that I didn't want anything to do with, and that's on him. And I'm incredibly grateful for the ride. I got to share with Rebecca briefly prior to the meeting, prior to this, and if you hook up with that higher power, you can have a life, trust me on this, that's beyond your wildest imagination. And I told her, if you make a connection with that higher power, you grab your butt with both hands because you're going for a ride. And that's true. Things have happened for me that are not possible to happen for me. And it was a gift. And today's sobriety is a gift. Unearned gift. And I'm incredibly grateful for that. I was born into a family that's had alcoholism in it for generations. Back in the Midwest, and about 1,500 miles east from here. And my mother was an alcoholic, my father was an alcoholic, both my grandfathers, my uncles, my aunts, and the whole family is insane. And so I was affected by alcoholism long before I got my own dose. And I grew up in this family, and I watched those people, and I thought, that crap ain't never going to happen to me. I'm smarter than they are. I'm healthier than they are. It can't happen to me. And by the time I was 13, 14 years old, I was a drunk driver already, and it's 2 years before I could have a driver's license. My mother used to let me get drunk and take the car out driving around and stuff like that. And she felt a little bit guilty because I had been removed from her custody by the court system back there when I was about 2 or 3 years old, because she'd rather be hanging out in a saloon. And what happened is one night she had a hot date in a saloon someplace and took me with her and left me locked in the car. And somebody else, one of the other drunks out of that saloon, called the police and said, there's a kid locked in a car here. And they came and got me, and I have never lived with her again since then. And I always felt bad about that, like I had something to do with it, and it had nothing to do with me. And anyway, I grew up in this family, and I made a few mistakes when I was a teenager, and the family wouldn't get off my back. And I had been out on the West Coast, and I had to go back east to get away from some of my problems. And the family wouldn't get off my back. And my job was, my family told me one day, your job today is to go to the high school and register, find out what you got to do is register and get signed up for your senior year in high school. So I went down there, and I was going to do that, and I had to walk. I was walking down the street, and I walked past a building that had a big sign on the front that said recruiter. And I said, I don't want to go to school anymore. So I went in and talked to that guy, and he said, we would love to have you, but you're not old enough. And you'd have to have your guardian's signature. And I said, hang on to that idea, I'll be back. And I went to where my guardian was when she was getting off work. And my guardian was my grandmother. I was raised by my grandparents. And she said, what are you doing here? And I said, I want to go in the Navy. And she said, you mean this at the end of this year after you graduate from high school? And I said, no ma'am, I mean tomorrow. And that woman loved me. And she said, Danny, if that's what you really, really want, I'll sign the papers. So I said, you have a date for tomorrow. So we went and saw the Navy recruiter the next day, and I was out of there. And I haven't lived back there since, and I'm so grateful. I did one tour in the Navy, and then I had a great idea. I think I want to get married. So I got out of the Navy so I could get married, and that was exactly the opposite of what I should have done. I had an experience. I enlisted in the military as we're getting ready to go overseas for the first time. I didn't know how long I was going to be gone, so I traveled from to where some of my family lived to say goodbye to them because I didn't know how long it would be since I see them again. And I had a couple of adult beverages and a couple of good ideas. And I was 18 years old. The next morning, one of my uncles called me, a guy who had married into our family, and he said, I would like to take you to dinner tonight, but you have to promise me you won't take any alcohol at all in your system. And I said, okay. And I didn't know what that was about. He took me to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting where they served dinner to the fellowship, and then they have a speaker meeting in San Diego area, Chula Vista, California, a place called the South Bay Pioneers. And he took me there, and we listened to this guy speak, and wasn't paying attention, and I didn't care. And I went to Tijuana the next night, Tijuana, Mexico, and I got that AA crap flushed right out of my system. And I didn't come back until I was 35 years old. And another incident I had when I was 18, that's important. Me and some friends had some adult beverages and a couple of good ideas, and we wound up locked up in jail. And again, I went at 18 years old, and the reason I had to go back and do that was because it'll come into my story a little later on. So I got to spend a night in jail when I was 18 and got that all straightened out. And I was gone out of the country for a year. And I did my time in the Navy as one enlistment, and like I said, I wanted to get married, and I had a weird idea that if you get married, that woman will be on your side. That's an insane idea, because she was never on my side. She'd rather fight than switch, and my God. She was raised in a family. Her mother had been divorced and married 5 times by the time my ex was 18 years old. So that's how she learned how to handle relationships. Get pissed off, divorce them, throw them away, do whatever you want, move on. And that's the way she was trained. And I got to suffer through that for a while. And marriage lasted 13 years, and we had a couple of little kids. And then she invited me to go away and, under force of law, had a couple of sheriff's deputies come over to the house, and they explained it to me. You can't live here anymore, but you still get to pay for everything. Oh, great. What a deal. And I got to do that for a while, and I was really, really, really pissed off that she was taking my kids away from me, and I couldn't. Because of I was thrown away when I was a little kid, I had an idea way down inside here that if I could find a family, then that would give me the sense of belonging that I've never had. And that never happened. So, but because she took that away from me, I was really angry, and I crawled in a vodka bottle and stayed there for a couple of years. I went to work every day. I did my job. I only had one or two incidences where my boss sent me home because he said I smelled like vodka. I had a bottle of vodka under the seat in my truck, one in the desk drawer, and I lived on that stuff. I had it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I couldn't stand being sober and being inside this skin. So I drank alcoholically, that full blown for a couple of years. And is there any blackout drinkers in here? All right, good. I'm home. I came out of a blackout one night driving down the street trying to find my way back home. I was running the streets every night like an animal, looking for lower companionship, and it's hard to find when you're it. But I got creative on that too. But I came out of a blackout one night. I'm driving home, and for whatever reason, I stopped and I dug through my wallet and I found that guy's phone number that had taken me to that AA meeting when I was 18. And I called him up, and he said, "Danny, what's going on in your life?" And I said, "My life is in the toilet. And if I could reach the handle, it would please me to pull it." And he said, "What you need to do is get your ass down here and let me get you started in Alcoholics Anonymous." He didn't say, "Is alcohol causing a problem in your life?" or any of that stuff. He already knew where I belonged. So for whatever reason, I listened to that hysterical advice. That's about September 1979. And I made the physical move from where I lived in Central California down to Southern California. And he started taking me to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and introducing me to AA people. He had been sober for 18 years at that time. This guy, named Stephen Thomas Moore. And he has gone on to the big meeting since. And he started taking me to AA meetings and introducing me to people and stuff like that. And then I had to go back to where I came from and go to for my last court appearance for my divorce. And then I got tore up real nice that night and caused some problems for some people that were friends of mine. And then the next day I went back to San Diego and I told him about it. And he said, he took me to an Alano club, AA Alano club, and set me down and give me a written test to see if I belonged in Alcoholics Anonymous. The test is called 20 Questions. It's not AA literature. It comes from a recovery home back on the East Coast someplace. He gave me this written test. He tore off the bottom so I couldn't read that and put it in his pocket. And gave me this test, and he said, "See if you can tell the truth." There's a suggestion there that I might fib on some. I don't know. But he gave me this and had me fill it out. And then I asked him, "Would you look at it? I don't know what I'm doing. Would you look at it? Help me figure this out." So he he gave me the part he had torn off and handed it to me, and it said, if you answer yes to 3 or more of these questions, you're probably alcoholic. And he went through that test, and there were 17 yeses on there. And then he called me on 2. He said, you didn't tell the truth on these 2. So I got 19 out of 20. That's an A in alcoholism. If anybody in this room belongs here, it's me. And I'm grateful to know that now. I didn't know that then. But I got an A in alcoholism on that test. Then he took me to an AA meeting. And they asked for newcomers, and he kept poking me in the ribs with his elbow and said, Danny, stand up, tell these people who you are and what you are. And I did that. I stood up for the first time and said, my name is Dan, and I'm an alcoholic. And that was on the 7th of January of 1980. I have not had to drink since. I don't smoke any of them funny little twisted cigarettes, none of that stuff. I'm a member of good standing in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm incredibly grateful to be here. That man told me, they talked about sponsorship, and he said, I can't be your sponsor because I'm too close to you personally. He said, but he had introduced me to his sponsor, and that old man had been sober for 27 years. And that was kind of impressive. So I asked him, would you sponsor me? And he said, yeah, he would do that. Then I don't know where I got the idea. I thought a sponsor's job was to listen to your problems and advise you and stuff like that. And feel sorry for you if that, but he didn't go to that school. And actually, I'm kind of grateful he didn't. He asked me one time, he said, what are you doing tomorrow? And I said, I got to get serious about looking for a job because I quit my job and moved down and I got child support to pay and all that stuff. And he said, before you do that, he said, I'm going to ask you to pray about it. And I don't pray at that time. When I was a little kid growing up in that family, they required me to go to a name brand religion, and they had their own schools and all that stuff, and that's what I was indoctrinated with. And my belief system out of that, after that, I turned my back on that and walked away from it. And because I believe that God is sitting up there on his throne, just waiting for an opportunity to step on me like a bug. And because that's what I thought he was about. And I thought, my belief system said that God won't do anything to help me. So this old man tells me to pray, and then as if he had peeked inside my little head, and he said, but before you do that, he said, you need to pray. When you pray, I said, I'm supposed to address my prayer to his higher power. And I said, why? And he says, because you obviously don't have one. And he was right. I didn't have one. So my first prayers were, I would hear some old jackass in an AA meeting talking about how great his life was. And I would hear that and listen to that, and then I would go out and say, whatever power is out there that helped that old jackass, would you please help me? And apparently that's a good prayer, because I'm still here. Wow, what a trip that's been. But he asked me one day what I was doing. I said, I gotta get a job. And he said, he wanted me to pray. And I said, okay, what prayer do you want me? What do you want me to say? He said, you asked for me to ask his higher power, help me be in the right place at the right time to have what you want me to have. And I said, what about what I want? He said, it doesn't matter what you want. You've had everything you wanted so far. How's that working for you? Not real well. Okay. Well, try this. So I tried that. And then he said, it's about me finding a job. And okay. So I did the prayer. Then he said, you take the first job that's offered to you after you do that prayer, because we will consider that the answer to the prayer. Okay. So I did the prayer, and 3 days later I got a call from the Navy. I had applied for civilian employment with the Navy in San Diego. And they said, we have several different jobs open right now, entry-level jobs. If you want to come down and take a look at them, pick one out. If you want it, it's yours. And okay. So I did that, and they gave me a job working with tools, doing mechanical stuff. And I worked there for a few years doing that, and I've had a bad back since I was 20 years old, 21 years old. And I had injured myself, and they had to remove me from doing mechanical stuff and put me in a support position working for somebody else. And when I was over there, I saw some things that were not getting done. And I went to the supervisor and said, this stuff is not getting done. And he said, I don't have anybody to do it. And I volunteered to do some stuff for him. Because I know they sent inspectors in from Washington, D.C. once a year, and they go through the place, and this is one of the things they'll find, and they'll gig him for that. But I told him, if you buy me some stuff, I will fix that for you so you don't have to worry about it, and it'll look a lot better. And he said, okay. You're willing to do that? And I said, yeah. So he bought me the stuff I wanted. It took me months, several months, to get this thing ironed out. And then I showed him how it worked and all that stuff. And he said, I want to go get the safety manager for the organization. We had 2,700 employees, this little Navy operation, all civilians. And he said, I want to go get the manager of the safety office and bring him down here and show him what you've done. I said, oh, it's yours. Show it to anybody you want. And he did that and got the safety manager, and he came down, went through it all. And then he said, I need somebody to come down to my office and do this for me. Would you be willing to do that if I could borrow you from him? And I said, I don't care. Whatever it takes to make the day go around, and I still get paid. And so I started doing that for him. I volunteered to do that. And then after a month or so, this safety manager came up to me and he said, I really like what you're doing. I like how you go about taking care of business. Would you like to work for me? And I said, Bill, I went down to the personnel office and I looked at what it takes to work here in this office. And I'm not qualified to do that. It requires a college education. He said, I didn't ask you that. I said, would you want a job with me? And I said, I'd love to work for you. So he pulled the strings, and I went to college for a couple of years under the GI Bill, but he put me in a position that all the other guys doing the same job for the same pay had 4 to 6 year college education in this field, occupational safety and health inspector. And he offered me that job, and I took it. And that almost doubled my salary just like that. And he said, I never had an employer say this to me before. He said, I will not put you in a position to fail. Anything you need, we will fix and get it going for you. And I could not believe I had that. We're just about out of time. I'm just about out of time. I surrendered to this program. Some of the sponsors I've had and some of the friends I've had have taught me how to surrender one day at a time, and how the best things in my life are going to come through. And they weren't joking me. The best things that I ever could imagine have happened in my life today. And I'm incredibly grateful for that. Things that have happened for me that things that I couldn't make happen. And I'm incredibly grateful. I'm going to bow out. I seem to be hung up a little bit and don't know where I want to go. But Alcoholics Anonymous gave me the best life I ever had. And I had doubts that it'd work, and and they told me it doesn't make any difference what you think. It's going to happen. And it did. My Father, my Creator, created a way for me to go that was better than anything I could have dreamt up. And that has worked. And in spite of my doubts, and we are so blessed to have this. And anyway, that's all I can do right here and right now. I'm incredibly grateful for the life that I was given as a result of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was hooked up with a higher power that I wasn't quite sure would work. I didn't know why he would do anything to help me. And it didn't make any difference because he did it anyway. And gave me the best deal I could ever have. And I went on, after I got promoted into that job, I worked there for another 12 years in that position. And my employer came to me and offered me early retirement if I filed for medical for reasons. I have medical problems, and which are true, and that's what was going on. And so they retired me, and now they send me money every month to stay hell away from them. And that's what I was looking for all along and didn't know it. And I'm incredibly grateful for that. It's the best life I ever could have put together, and I didn't have the skills or the tools to do it myself. And the higher power doesn't care. If you offer yourself, turn your will and your life over to the care of this Creator. I was told about the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. The problems are described on page 62. And the solutions in that book are on page 63. That's where I turn my will and my life over to the Creator to straighten out my existence. And he didn't hold anything back. He made it possible for me. And I am incredibly grateful. I've lived in Arizona for 5 years. I'm blessed to be sober and clean and semi-sane. It's the best life I've ever had, and most of it's because it wasn't my idea. We are truly, truly blessed to be here, to be sober, and to be able to make a connection with that higher power that can do for us things we can't do for ourselves. And that's what happened to me. And if that's what you want in your life, you can have that. Say, thy will, not mine, be done. Anyway, thank you for allowing me to be in the meeting.